All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It is a delight. I don't even know what to say. I'm overwhelmed by your warm and apparently unceasing recorded applause. Thank you very much. It is a Thursday. We are a live show. 2 glorious hours, everyone. I know. Every minute of it is glorious. East Coast 2 to 4, West Coast 11 to 1, and across the world. Please join us from wherever you are. By the way, that being mentioned, I saw someone joining today. There it is. Hello, everyone. Tuning in from Stockholm, Sweden. Come on, Sweden.
Oh, welcome aboard.
Shout out to Sweden.
What?
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Northern coast of California, Southern California repped by Zero Sum. I still have this crud or whatever it is, like a long summer cold, so apologies for clearing my throat occasionally. Big show today, primarily because I would say some of the biggest news affecting America and the world is associated with the law and with tariffs and with the occupation of American cities and with major legal judgments that have now been rendered against this administration. And so when it comes to the law and a lot of these things, particularly when it comes to tariffs, the preliminary legal judgments, meaning preliminary to a SCOTUS decision, those have all been forecast as such by our guest in hour 2, one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world, David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney. He is brilliant, and as usual, he is correct in suggesting, as he has for weeks now, that these tariffs would be ruled illegal. And his prediction is that the Supreme Court, and that's sort of the context in which I was mentioning the Supreme Court just a moment ago, that the Supreme Court will also rule that the tariffs were imposed illegally by this president, that you just can't declare an emergency and all of a sudden seize the tax importation leverage that Congress has and begin to impose these import taxes. Now, these are taxes, and the president does not have the right constitutionally to impose these taxes. Congress does. Now, Congress has more or less relinquished that right. I shouldn't say more or less. They have, right? They just rolled over for Donald Trump. Clearly, the strength of the threats from Donald Trump, politically, maybe even beyond politically. I mean, Mitt Romney has written about the fact that there is a sense of a physical threat, that his followers have already demonstrated what they'll do on January 6th, and that there's a sense in Congress that if you get in the way of this guy, you could really run into the literal physical threat to your family and to yourself. So in any case, in that context, Congress has removed itself. So Trump just began this chaotic tariff policy. It's utterly absurd. It's informed by a complete misunderstanding of, he can't even explain the tariff arithmetic. So it's a complete misunderstanding of tariffs, how they work, of trade deficits, how they work. And, of course, the bizarro cherry on top is that the personal aspects of Trump's view of the world, for example, Bolsonaro's trial in Brazil, that factors into the tariff policy of the United States of America. The United States of America has a 50% tariff on Brazil because the president personally is offended by the way Bolsonaro is being treated by the Brazilian justice system. And Bolsonaro, of course, is being tried for a coup attempt. And it doesn't stop there. The tariff policy imposed by Donald Trump with utter fiat, personal fiat. It's not done with a team of economic advisors. In fact, the economic advisors knew nothing of the actual specifics. We know this because they said as much. This is the president. He's the genius. Anyway, not to get ahead of ourselves, but
I
yeah,
think you
on
should
that
be-
day, was it Freedom Day or Liberty Day? Is that what he called it, Kim?
Liberation Day. I don't know.
Liberation Day? Yeah.
I think you should be dinged for fiat. By the way, that's pretty creative.
All right. Fiat is a ding word.
Kim, how are you?
Very, very well done. Kim is here. Albert is
Albert,
here.
thank you.
We've got a lot to get to. I didn't mean to get...
All this tariff stuff's exciting, but did you hear that nobody won the Powerball jackpot?
Nobody won the Powerball jackpot.
Let's get to what's really important here.
You are
The
absolutely
dream
right.
is still alive.
Yeah. Again, I'm getting the impression, because I've seen long lines of people to buy these Powerball tickets. I've seen the videos. There seem to be a lot of people buying these things, and yet nobody is winning. I'm getting the impression that it's pretty hard to win.
Are you saying the fix is in?
No, I'm just saying that it must be that I haven't run the numbers, but it must be really, really hard to win the lottery. Is that
would be 1 in 292 million? You've got a chance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That yeah, that's very hard.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
But also
1 in 200 million. You know, when I was a kid, many years ago,
7
they used to use the phrase 1 in a million, and that was like, you know, considered extraordinary. Like you wouldn't be part of something where you only have a 1 in a million chance of winning. Now 1 in a million seems like a good bet.
Yeah.
This is 1 in 200 million.
Almost 3. 292 million.
Wow.
Just the odds of you getting struck by lightning is 1 in 15,000. So
Albert, thank you.
There you go. What does that pay, Albert, when you get hit by lightning? Anything? Or is no?
if it's in
just
Florida, it'll be on the Mark Thompson show.
Very good.
Don't
Excellent.
stand outside holding your Powerball ticket.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right. So David Katz in hour 2, and he will address a lot of what I was just talking about with the tariffs. The Powerball continues to be an elusive dream for many. We have other news from Stephen Miller and his wild Trump worshiping moment on Fox News that I will share with you later this hour. The seizing of voting machines by the Justice Department in a state that Donald Trump won. I'll touch on that. The Navy, at the clear direction, I would say, of the Donald Trump administration, reversing a major decision. I will get to that. And RFK Jr. is on Capitol Hill, and I will share some of that testimony with you. He is getting rotisseried right now, and I will share a lot of that with you as well. Giorgio Armani died, Kim. You saw that the fashion designer, Giorgio Armani, 91 years old. And I got to think, wow, what an impact this guy had, you know? He'd been sick for a while, apparently. And he was known as King Giorgio. His company was founded in 1975. It became a byword for sleek, understated style, they note here. In 1980, they suggest, it was the breakout moment. His suits, the Armani suits, worn by Richard Gere in the movie, anyone? American Gigolo. Yeah.
American Gigolo. Got it. Yeah.
And that, of course, helped his profile, and it expanded into a global empire, covered everything from, you know, haute couture to high street fashion, eyeglasses, shoes, homeware. I mean, Armani became a lifestyle brand. And his red carpet design, worn by Diane Keaton when she attended the Academy Awards, she won an Oscar for Best Actress in Annie Hall that night. And it's part of, and it's interesting to see Armani himself sort of change through the years, you know. But the fashion, the ready-to-wear fashion is something that Armani became part of as well. So his pants and unlined jackets created this very distinct silhouette, as it's suggested in his obit write-ups. And his business expanded beyond clothing to include cosmetics, perfume, home furnishings, accessories. Forbes estimated his net worth What was Giorgio Armani's net worth at his death? What was Giorgio Armani's net worth at his death? And I will give you a clue. You need to guess over $1 billion. Okay?
Oh, wow.
I mean,
5 billion?
5 billion, says Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Albert, what do you think Giorgio Armani's net worth was? I mean, he had great success. It's not the most important thing, but it does speak to how powerful a brand Armani has become.
Yeah, I felt like he was a staple at Macy's. Like everything was branded at Macy's there, and his name probably like 20 billion.
Wow, 20 billion. So we got 5, we've got 20 in the chat. We have a 3.5, says Tammy. More money than the lottery, says Susan Roberts. It is more money than the lottery. You're right about that. 50 billion says to let the actual retail price, $12.1 billion at, He was 235th among the world's billionaires. But more than anything, just a master of style, a tremendous impact on the culture, right? And as I say, he'd been sick for some time, 91 years old. The other passing that's of note, and of course, they're all these many notable passings. We only have, time for a couple, was the Graham Greene death, I thought. He was nominated for an Oscar for Dances with Wolves. He was just 73 years old. It's always sad when somebody that young passes away. He was a Canadian First Nations actor, and he opened doors for a lot of Indigenous actors in Hollywood. And he passed away in Canada in a Toronto hospital. Nominated for an Oscar, as I think I mentioned, for Dances with Wolves. Mm-hmm. They say he was a great man of morals, ethics, and character, and will be eternally missed. And think about how difficult it is. He was born in 1952. And I mean, finding a living in Hollywood as an Indigenous, First Nations actor, as an Indigenous actor looking for roles beyond just the sort of, you'll ride in on a horse and then you'll scalp somebody in Act 2 and then you'll be taken down. But you know what I mean? It's like, in other words, to fall into a cliche would be very easy, but it was just the opposite with him. So Costner cast him as one of the main characters in Dances with Wolves. That was in 1990. 12 Academy Award nominations that film got. And it launched his career. And he was in Maverick with Mel Gibson and Jodie Foster, Die Hard with a Vengeance with Bruce Willis. He was in The Green Mile with Tom Hanks. He was in The Twilight Saga with Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson. Molly's Game. So, I mean, Thunderheart opposite Val Kilmer. He's really great in that. Transamerica. These are just a few. Taylor Sheridan's Wind River. That's a terrific movie with Jeremy Renner, and he has a major role in that film. So, in any case, I didn't realize he was nominated also for a Grammy, a Gemini, and Canadian Screen Actor Award.
I don't know what a Gemini is.
Neither do I.
Some kind of Canadian award, maybe?
I don't know.
Google it.
Yeah, look it up.
Look it up. I really liked him, though. I don't ever remember seeing him in any bad movie. Gemini Awards given by the Academy of Canadian Cinema and Television.
No, you were right, Kim. How about that? Yeah,
to recognize achievements of Canada's English language television industry. Yeah, it was given between 1986 and 2011, so I don't think they do it anymore.
Usually
Interesting.
they apologize to them if they lose. Like, sorry, you didn't win this.
So sorry. No, somebody in the chat saying, wasn't he an author? There was a Graham Greene who was an author. You're absolutely right. But this is a different Graham Greene. Yeah.
I was reading an obituary
novelist Graham Greene, yeah.
In his final hours, Graham Greene unsuccessfully tried to reach out to Kevin Costner to express his gratitude for changing his life with that role in Dances with Wolves.
Wow, but
Yeah.
Costner wouldn't take the call. What happened?
I don't know. Maybe Costner was busy.
I'm on my deathbed calling you to say thanks,
Yeah.
and you and you roll me over to your assistant. I mean, what
Yeah.
kind of crap? Yeah. All right. Well, rest in peace, our dear friends. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I want to get to a lot of stuff today, and as I mentioned, the legal setbacks of this administration are now beginning to pile up. So those who oppose the Trump agenda have to be happy. The problem with the Trump agenda, I'm sure we pointed out here, and I'm sure you have it in mind, is that it plugs along even in its illegality. And the only way these setbacks ultimately turn back a lot of administration policy is with these legal judgments, but judgments, they oftentimes come, months after the policy's in place. I mean, immigration's a great example. So you can rule against the administration for their immigration policy, for the illegal way in which many are being piled onto aircraft and sent off to El Salvador or Sudan or Uganda or wherever. But once the illegality is established by the court, those people who are there in El Salvador and Sudan and Uganda, they're already there. And so you can do a lot of damage to a lot of lives before the legal judgments actually turn back the policy.
Did you hear about the plane full of children that they tried to leave in the middle of the night? But the judge
1
said,
a.m.
oh, no, you got to stop. Yeah.
1 a.m. they pile these kids on. And the judge's ruling was complete, thorough, specific. And now those kids have been taken off that flight that Kim is talking about. But the immigration policy, I think, is filled with illegalities, and we'll talk more about it with David Katz. But yeah, that's a classic example. And listen, everything that's legitimate happens in the middle of the night, right? I mean, that's the reason you do it in the middle of the night, because it's so legitimate. Yeah. Did you see that Xi and Putin were discussing organ transplants and immortality? It was caught in a hot mic moment, apparently.
You always wonder what those dictators talk about when when no one's paying attention.
Yeah, life's going so well. Their first ever joint public appearance, and 27 world leaders were attending this massive military parade in Beijing. We showed you a bunch of it, and it was being live streamed. It's the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, and so there was a lot of media coverage of it. And they were on the rostrum there in the Tiananmen Square. By the way, rostrum is a great word. That is a ding word. To watch this parade. So Putin and Xi, they're both 72, appeared to be discussing the world's strides in life expectancy. While it used to be rare for people to reach age 70, quote, now they say that at 70, you are only a child, said Xi. And some have predicted that the biotech advances will be able to, quote, transplant human organs continuously, grow younger with age, and perhaps even achieve immortality. This is what Putin said to Xi through a translator in Mandarin, right? And then Xi, who at that point was off camera, can be heard saying, quote, some have predicted that by the end of this century, humans could potentially live up to 150 years. So it was unclear, apparently, whether the conversation was being translated for Kim. Kim, who's head of North Korea, is said to be around 41 years old, and he was smiling. Yeah, he's the kid in it all.
It's not fake. That's real.
Yeah, you guys can sweat how long you guys will live, and also what transplants you'll need. And I'm just going to keep on chugging, and meanwhile, I'll just assassinate my foes. So,
interesting conversation. It's so weird. By the way, did you see in that video how they have these guys in their 70s marching straight uphill?
Oh my God! Yeah, look at that.
It's really quite an incline. You can kind of people in the background are like trudging up this hill.
Well, Trump
Funny.
should feel lucky that he wasn't invited to this. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a tough little endurance test. Yeah. By the way, organ transplants that they reference in that conversation, pretty sensitive in China because there are a lot of human rights groups that say that organs are being harvested from prisoners, executed prisoners in China. China said that they don't do that anymore. They pledged not to do it anymore. Yeah, that was the old China. Now we don't do that. Yeah. Anyway, that's that was the latest on that. Just kind of a weird development in all of that. It has been one of those odd weeks so far, and among the oddities is a reversal in the demotion of Representative Ronnie Jackson. I don't know.
That's nice.
Yeah, he was a.
No, it's not.
Wasn't
nice.
he? Was he a congressperson? I thought he was a congressperson as well as a military guy, but maybe not.
Well, I know he was medical personnel. He was the doctor in the White House during the first Trump administration, and then I think he was under Obama as well. But he had all kinds of weird stuff. He's the guy that said Trump's genes has the best genes or whatever.
Yeah.
Remember him?
Yeah, most handsome president we've ever had. I just want to. I'm pretty sure that he was a congressman too, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I have this.
I think you might.
Yeah,
be
he
right.
was in Texas. Yeah. Thank you. I don't know. I was just wanting to get clear on that.
Yeah.
Not important to the story, but I was just curious. Anyway, so as Kim noted, he's a former White House physician, and apparently he was demoted because of a bunch of stuff he did. I think it was sort of sexism times, with a multiplier, sexual harassment. He made a couple of denigrating and sexual comments about a female subordinate, and he violated the policy on drinking alcohol on a presidential trip. He took prescription strength sleeping medication, and that prompted worries from his colleagues about his ability to provide proper medical care. He denied the allegations. He claimed that it was a political hit job, but there was enough credible evidence of what I've just described for him to be demoted. And as Kim noted, he served in the White House medical unit during the Bush, Obama, and the first Trump administrations.
Oh, Bush too. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had some cred. And again, of course, then he talked about Donald Trump's incredibly good genes. And he said Trump would live to 200 years if he'd have a better diet. In any case, he was demoted. But this just happened. He has now been remoted. He went from demoted to remoted. Yeah, restored his retired rank of Rear Admiral. It was a 2022 demotion, again, after that investigation. And it was a scathing report on his comportment during these trips and also what he'd said, denigrating colleagues and subordinates in sexual ways, etc. So he has regained his title. Isn't that right, Kim? That's the deal. The Navy's confirmed that. Yeah.
Is anybody surprised that Pete Hegseth, who runs the Pentagon and has been accused of sexual crimes, would take pity on a guy who made denigrating comments against women and who was boozing it up and taking sleeping pills when he's supposed to be, clear-headed on trips where you might have to care for the president of the United States?
Yeah.
Hegseth's like, you're fine. Give it back to him. He's good.
Yeah. It's like he's another frat boy doing well in this administration, right? Great party buddy.
He just said some things and took some pills. It's fine.
Yeah. You're not going to demote my drinking buddy. No way. I'm reinstalling. Yeah. That's utter lunacy, but right on brand for this this cruise. So.
The Mark Thompson Show.
RFK Jr. is on Capitol Hill, and it is not with the warmest welcome that RFK Jr. is finding his testimony being greeted. I would say, Albert, we have multiple choices here. Let's go first with that last little clip that I sent you. This is RFK Jr. Again, I'll play Elizabeth Warren with RFK Jr. These clips run a little bit in length. We can do that on the show and kind of give you a little bit more. But here is RFK Jr. on the Hill this morning. This just happened a few moments ago.
Mr. Secretary, I agree with a lot of my colleagues' statement. I actually had hoped. I didn't support you.
Those of you who stop for a second,
I
those
thought
of you
taking on
who
chronic
are
illnesses
only
was gonna be
listening and not watching, you are missing the fact that he is incredibly tanned. I mean, RFK Jr. looks to have just come off the, I don't know, the Amalfi Coast, the Riviera, Kennebunkport, where the Kennedys have a compound. It's unbelievable. I mean, I can't, you know, for a guy who's working, it's incredible that he has as much sun. I mean, believe me, I wouldn't be pointing it out were it not so insanely prominent in the way he looks.
He
So
also has a posture where he's just kind of slouching in his chair like he really doesn't give a rat's ass.
Yeah, I'm going to give him that because it's a long thing. But yeah, people are saying spray tan, whatever it is. I don't know what it, but man, but you're right. He's certainly not sitting at attention. He's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Let me get back to the tanning bed. All right, go ahead, Albert. Sorry.
Secretary Kennedy, thank you for being here. In May, you said, and I quote, "I stand with President Trump to say, no more middlemen, no more foreign freeloaders, no more skyrocketing drug prices. We're putting American patients first and taking on big pharma to make America healthy again." Yet your record tells a different story. In July, Republicans handed big pharma a massive win. Their big, beautiful bill that they just passed shields billion-dollar drugs like Keytruda, the world's top-selling cancer drug, from Medicare negotiation. Keytruda has been on the market since 2014. It pulled in nearly $18 billion last year in the United States alone. It costs patients up to $175,000 a year, draining Medicare of billions and forcing families into crushing debt or to forego life-saving care. And yet you support the big, beautiful bill. So despite the hype with executive orders and Washington Republicans only drug pricing law days relief for Medicare patients relying on high-cost cancer drugs, meanwhile, Democrats finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices. I will say that Keytruda, along with Opdivo, and Darzalex, the three top-selling cancer drugs, were widely expected to be selected for Part B negotiation in 2026 for 2028 implementation. They are now, because of the actions of this administration, exempt from negotiation for at least several additional years, if not permanently. So my question to you, Mr. Secretary, is how do you justify claiming to take on big pharma while supporting a bill that shields drugs like Keytruda and other cancer drugs from Medicare negotiation, costing seniors and taxpayers billions and risking the lives of cancer patients who cannot afford their necessary medication?
Yeah, Senator, I appreciate the question. The Medicare drug negotiations in the IRA were very well intentioned, but they were poorly structured. And what we found is that the negotiations that have occurred actually have ended up raising the costs for Medicare. We are right now in negotiations.
The CBO has not agreed to that. The CBO doesn't say that. It's just the opposite. So you're saying the CBO and independent agencies that validate the costs are wrong?
That is CMS data.
Okay, so let's just focus on the cancer drugs. Why aren't we negotiating those and bringing those down for families? Why does the bill exempt those?
It's part of the MFN negotiations. I'm not sure that provision in the bill of the one beautiful bill, but you're
not sure of the provision, the negotiation provision, and how exempted
for Keytruda.
Your agency is responsible for that negotiation, and you don't know about it?
I know that we're negotiating in the MFN.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Secretary. Let me ask you another question. How much are Medicare Part D enrollees expected to pay for prescription drug coverage next year?
I think that is in debate right now.
Let me tell you.
Are you talking about
They are going to pay $15 more than last year, up to $50 a month. Now, let me have a question for you on Part B. How much are Medicare Part B premiums expected to increase next year?
I don't know. I talked to Dr. Osborne yesterday. I think it's 16%. They're supposed to increase about 11.6% or $21.50 more each month.
And again, last time you were before me, you couldn't answer the questions of the very agency and the authority that you have to address these issues. Next year, seniors and families are facing higher healthcare costs across the board. 23 million people on Medicare with a standalone Part D drug plan could see their premiums rise to $50 a month, up from $35, because the Trump administration is cutting the federal subsidy that has been keeping costs down. Part B premiums will jump 11.6% to $206 a month in 2026, one of the largest single-year increases in decades. And so for an administration that claims it is lowering costs, my question to you is, what are you going to do to keep costs down for seniors?
I mean, I'm already doing I'm already keeping costs down.
What are you doing to keep costs down for seniors, knowing that these costs are going to be increasing?
I mean, the program integrity bill, that is the first action that I did when I got in. It's one of the earliest actions in history of a complex regulation by an HHS secretary. A congressional budget office has said that that's brought premiums down by 5%. That is the congressional budget office, which does not like to acknowledge anything that we do.
And does that impact seniors?
Excuse me?
Does that impact seniors? And I know my time is running out. Does that impact seniors? What you just talked about, you're lowering costs. I'm asking you specifically.
We're lowering
about helping
costs.
Seniors. Does it impact seniors?
Does it impact?
Come on. Let me just stop here.
I didn't
My
hear
time is
what
running
you
out,
said.
so I appreciate the chairman's indulgence here. My concern is you can't answer the questions. The very agency has oversight over these issues and controls the levers to lower costs for seniors. And you can't answer that simple question.
I didn't hear your question.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You get the idea. He's swimming away from it. And that's just that's Catherine Cortez Masto. She's from Nevada. But I want you to know that's just a sliver. The guy gets rotisseried. And I'm going to play you another cut just because I want you to realize. And then I'm going to give you the news of the day, which is, and again, this is so far, that was about money. Okay. And it's important because in American healthcare, it's all about money. We're unique in the world with this crap where if you run out of money, just let people go and they end up in the grave. If you have cancer and you can't pay for the medicine, you're just screwed.
Yeah.
And this is America. And so she's right to talk about these areas in which seniors and others who need good coverage can possibly get a break. And she's right, Catherine Cortez Masto is, to mention that which was, and as you know, I thought it was almost tepid. Just 10 drugs were identified, at least initially, in the Biden plan, that huge piece of legislation that went through that finally got Medicare the ability to negotiate drug pricing down on diabetes medication, on cancer medication, on this sort of thing. So she's right to talk about this. And the loss of this stuff as a negotiable, navigable area where you might at least be able to give some break to those who desperately need these medicines. She's right to focus on that. This is leaving aside, is the point, the immunization controversies, which are, to call them controversies is to be polite. It's a mess. You fired the CDC staff associated with vaccine approval. You fired the advisory board, everybody on it. You just decapitated everyone. These are esteemed public servants who have tremendous credibility in the area of medicine and these recommendations that are required for vaccines. You've just gotten rid of them, and you've repopulated these agencies with your anti-vaxxers. I mean, at minimum, wouldn't you concede, RFK Jr., that you're doing the very thing that you accused the prior administrations of doing? You're saying, prior to your ascendance to running this HHS, that it was all one-sided. It was all pro-vaccine people. Well, what is it now? It's all anti-vax people. So you've gone the other way. I mean, so at minimum, you're as guilty as they are. And worse, you may be tanking the health and welfare of the American people because of these crazy policies and voodoo medicine that you're making part of the American governmental posture toward vaccines. Albert, play me the first cut that I sent you. I think that relates to some of this vaccine stuff that he gets into. Again, this is just a couple of hours ago on Capitol Hill, RFK Jr., the tanned Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Hey, I agree with a lot of my colleagues' statement. I actually had hoped, I didn't support you. I thought taking on chronic illnesses was going to be important. I've got 2 kids, as we discussed when we met, that have chronic illnesses. I'm not sure that the focus on red dye and seed oils are going to fully solve that problem.
Of course they won't.
I would say this, that seems where your emphasis is. I want to go back to just, again, some basic facts. Do you accept the fact that 1 million Americans died from COVID?
I don't know how many died.
What?
You're the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You don't have any idea how many Americans died from COVID?
I don't think anybody knows that because there was so much data chaos coming out of the CDC, and there was so many perverse incentives. And these are models.
You don't know the answer of how many Americans died from COVID. This is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Do you think the vaccine did anything to prevent additional deaths?
Again, I would like to see the data and talk about the data.
You have had this job for 8 months, and you don't know the data about whether the vaccine saved
and that's
lives?
the problem, is that they didn't have the data. The data by the Biden administration absolutely dismal.
So who is politicizing? You're saying the Biden administration politicized all the data? Go back to what Senator Cantwell just said.
Fired Dr.
Go to
Krauss.
the Trump Surgeon General.
They fired Dr. Krauss. They fired all the people who questioned the orthodoxy. They fired Dr. Gruber, Dr. Krauss.
So, Mr. Chairman, the Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't know how many Americans died from COVID. Doesn't know if the vaccine helped prevent any deaths. And you are sitting as Secretary of Health and Human Services? How can you be that ignorant? I remember when we went through the hearing with you, I asked you about community health centers. You didn't know what role they play. I've been visiting community. I'm glad you got to one. I think in April. I tell you what I hear on community health centers, they are terrified, with all due respect to my good friend, the chairman, of the big awful bill, because they are going to lose health care across the board. They already live in food deserts. They can't get to a nutritionist because Medicaid doesn't do enough reimbursement. If you're going to want Americans to get healthier, should they have access to nutritionists? Should they have access to good science about healthy food?
Absolutely.
Well, then how is that going to happen with the Medicaid cuts that are taking place?
There are no cuts to Medicaid.
Sir, that is an absurd. There is not a single, some of my Republican colleagues, but there is not a single study that does not, and I can tell you, I was in Franklin, Virginia, a couple days ago. The rural hospital is going to close. The hospital system was so afraid they wouldn't even let me have the meeting there. But that rural hospital is going to close. And they are looking for where those folks are going to go. I mean,
very good. Very good. Thank you, Albert. We've talked about this at length, the fact that these rural hospitals remain dependent essentially on federal monies coming in. It's not just the individual who is insured by Medicaid. It's the fact that the Medicaid monies, that stream, supports the hospital in many other different ways. So you end up essentially subsidizing a lot of what the hospital can do because of Medicaid money coming in. So when you have cuts to Medicaid, that's the reason these rural hospitals are closing. I now want to just turn to the vaccine situation. There are, let me just see what my time situation. Yeah, play me a little Elizabeth Warren, and then I'll talk to you about and mention what is going to happen more and more in America, which is that states are realizing, oh, the government is being dismantled. It's being run by a bunch of crazies who are on this ridiculous jihad. They got in. I think this administration got in. I know a lot of single issue voters who are anti-vaxxers. That's all they care about. So now you've got the anti-vaxxers having taken over the CDC, HHS. You have Americans' health care being determined by utter quackery. It's not a measured, balanced review of information. As I say, it's zealotry. So that's where we are. And you can expect that states are going to begin to take on the role of the federal government in ways that will allow them to create their own vaccine policy. More on that in a second, but here's Elizabeth Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last November, while you were under consideration to become Secretary of Health and Human Services, Mr. Kennedy, you said, quote, if vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. No exceptions, no ifs, ands, or buts. You would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. Then last week, you announced that the COVID-19 vaccine is no longer approved for healthy people under the age of 65. In announcing the change, you said the vaccine will be available for anyone who wants it. Now, obviously, both things cannot be true at the same moment. So let's clear this up right now, Secretary Kennedy. Will you tell America that all adults and all children over 6 months of age are eligible to get a COVID booster at their local pharmacy today?
Anybody can get the booster.
I'm sorry?
Anybody can get it, Senator.
Anybody. So you're saying that is now the official rule of HHS. Anybody is eligible to get a booster by just walking into the pharmacy.
It's not recommended for healthy people.
No. If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that in many states is that you can't walk into a pharmacy and get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people vaccines.
We're not going to recommend a product for which there's no clinical data for that indication. Is that what I should be doing?
What you should be doing is honoring your promise that you made when you were looking to get confirmed in this job.
You're going like this.
That is, you promised that you would not take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them. You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine.
I'm not taking them away from people, Senator.
It takes it away if you can't get it from your pharmacist.
Well, most Americans are going to be able to get it from their pharmacy for free. Most Americans will be able to get it from their pharmacy for free.
The question is everyone who wants it. That was your promise.
No, I didn't. I never promised that I was going to recommend products with which there is no indication.
When you said.
And I know you've taken $855,000 from pharmaceutical companies, Senator.
Did you hold up a big sign saying that you were lying when you said that? Because you are the one who said you would not take them away. Now, Senator Kennedy,
I'm not taking them away from anybody.
Secretary,
you want me to indicate a product for which there is no clinical data?
Senator,
is that what you want?
Secretary Kennedy, you said you wouldn't, and now you did.
I'm not taking them away. Everybody can get access to them.
No, they can't walk into a pharmacy the way they could last month and get access.
It depends on the state. It depends on the states.
A year ago,
but they can still get it. Everybody can get it. Everybody can get it, Senator.
So look, let's move on. You clearly are taking away vaccines. I've seen the list for what's coming up next, and that is the agenda for the next CDC vaccine panel. And first up is ratifying your COVID actions. Second is hepatitis B is on the agenda. So should Americans expect you to take away hepatitis vaccine access as well, even though you promised not to?
As I said, I'm not taking vaccines away from anybody.
Okay, same answer, right? You're just going to deny that when people can't get access, that you're not taking it away. Then let me ask you, is that the same game you're going to play with me?
You want me to recommend every product in the world?
No,
so that without any clinical trial data.
Through on your promises.
Yeah, my promise was to give.
A month ago, we could get COVID vaccines by just walking.
You can still get COVID vaccines, Senator.
You are taking that away.
No, you are still. You can still get the COVID vaccines, and Medicare will still pay for them, and Medicaid will still pay.
The head of the CDC that if she refused to sign off on your changes to the childhood vaccine schedule, that she had to resign.
No, I told her that she had to resign because I asked her, are you a trustworthy person? And she said no. So if you had an employee who told you they weren't trustworthy, would you ask them to resign, Senator?
So I'm sorry, but this is not what she has said publicly. She has
Well,
said.
I'm not surprised about that.
So you're saying she's lying?
Yes. Every conversation I had with her, there
And
were
let me get
witnesses.
this straight. This is the same person that less than a month earlier, you stood next to her and described her as unimpeachable. And you had full confidence in her, and that you had full confidence in her scientific credentials. And in a month, she became a liar?
Yeah, you should ask her what changed. And by the way, a month ago, you were voting against her. Oh, because you thought she was either incompetent, ineligible, or unsuited to the task.
I voted
Now I
against her
agree
because
with
I was afraid she was going to bend the knee to you and Donald Trump. And it looks like she didn't bend the knee, so you fired her. Look,
Nice
you are
job.
putting
That's that. I wanted to give you a good, healthy chunk of that. So that's the back and forth that I think has typified a lot of the conversation around what we've seen. And I'm just noticing something. Is this a reverse image today, Albert? Are you seeing a reverse image from me?
No.
No. Why am I seeing a reverse image on my screen? You see what I'm talking about, Albert? No.
No.
Okay.
I have noticed that when you're playing music in the background, your mic kind of gets distorted. But that was only when you had some dueling.
This is weird. I don't know when I
audios,
can.
but-
I don't know when I can adjust this. When you drop this video, you'll cut this part out, and I'll get back onto Elizabeth Warren in a second. But it's just an odd. I'm seeing something strange right now.
That's weird. Well, we see normal things.
You
so-
do? Okay. All right. So yeah, Mark, please don't get distracted. Is what you're saying? Okay.
Kimmy Smith says, not true. I tried to schedule my COVID booster and I had to qualify.
Yeah. You
Thank
have
you for the
to.
contribution. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Kimmy, for that. What you're seeing is, first of all, I loved I thought Elizabeth Warren stuck the landing there when she talked about the firings at the CDC, because clearly these are, even for those who were brought on board by RFK Jr., his demands have become so outrageous that they just can't countenance them, and they're not continuing at the CDC. That was the reason for the most recent firing. But what's happened is, as the vaccine availability has melted away and it has no longer the federal government backing, states are beginning to band together to try to make some plan for a health alliance. And this is happening in Washington, Oregon, and California so far. There may be others that will join. So COVID-19 cases, as you know, are rising. There's a huge surge in COVID right now. And the CDC restructured, you could say, downsized. It has been, I'd suggest dismantled in many ways. I mean, this really was the shining star of medical research. Some of the greatest scientists and doctors in the world came through the CDC, resided at the CDC. In fact, it was viewed as, from the rest of the world I'm talking about, a place where research crescendoed into policy. And now you're seeing Washington, Oregon, and California saying that we'll have an alliance and safeguard health policies here that we think will protect the public.
It's like a vaccine alliance. 'Cause
Exactly.
they can see that people, unless they have to meet a certain set of qualifications, be 65 or older to get the COVID booster. Well, what if I want the COVID booster? I'm not 65. I can't go out and get it now. I can't go out and get it for my kids either.
Washington State Health Secretary Dennis Worsham said public health is about prevention, preventing illness, preventing the spread of disease, and preventing early avoidable deaths. And of course, as an aside, we've mentioned it before, there's no question that modern vaccine technology has tremendously, I mean, in a watershed way, changed life expectancy and longevity. I mean, disease was the great threat to humanity. The human species was culled by these diseases through generation after generation. And if it didn't lead to death, it could lead to horrifying consequences. So these vaccine technologies are critical in taking us to this other level. And here's the quote from the Oregon health director. Vaccines are among the most powerful tools in modern medicine. There you go. They have indisputably saved millions of lives. But when guidance about their use becomes inconsistent or politicized, it undermines public trust at precisely the moment we need it the most. So there is medical advice being sought, and there are many in Oregon, in California, in Washington. I'm talking about leading public health officials who are getting together to, as Kim has suggested, sort of form a vaccine and healthcare task force. So,
and how ridiculous that we should have to do that.
It's what's happening increasingly across so many different policy areas, right?
Yeah,
and of course, the administration is offended by this. And so HHS says, quote, Democrat-run states that pushed unscientific school lockdowns, toddler mask mandates, and draconian vaccine passports during COVID's era completely eroded the American people's trust in public health agencies. We remain the scientific body guiding immunization recommendations. And HHS will ensure policy is based on rigorous evidence and gold standard science, not the failed politics of the pandemic. By the way, one of the, first of all, there was a lot of disagreement about policy during the pandemic. It was kind of being, I think, put together on the fly. The mask mandates, the mask strategies, the mask research. It was being reinvented along the way. I think that the same is true of the vaccine. The vaccine, insanely effective initially, and then as the landscape of the virus changed, the mutations of the virus were way ahead of the vaccine changes. And so you ended up with a vaccine that would keep you out of, in general, serious health problems, that would hospitalize you from COVID, but you didn't end up with a vaccine, as was sort of represented early on, and we spoke frankly about this, a vaccine that was like, going to be making me bulletproof. I don't want to get COVID at all. That's why I got the vaccine. Just like polio, just like smallpox, etc. Yeah, the problem was that the landscape of this virus was changing, as I say, to the point that there was no way, apparently with existing medical technology, to really make us bulletproof. So we ended up with this mRNA technology, which is incredibly powerful and interesting. I read a book on it, and I forget what it was called, but it was really, it's got that CRISPR technology. I think that's an anagram for something, or not a what do you call that? When you put letters together to, it's a, anyway.
Abbreviation?
No, there's another word. But anyway, that technology allowed them to, it comes from cancer research, it allowed them to modify the vaccine, month to month, year to year. So there was a lot being learned on the fly in a way that sort of we're building the plane while we're flying it. That metaphor, I think, applied a bit to COVID-19. But because of those failings, we end up with all of these different cross currents about medical technologies, medical recommendations, the gold standard. It wasn't double blind. I mean, they were trying to stop the bleeding, to be fair. And I think in an effort to stop the bleeding, they aggressively went after this COVID-19 virus with this technology, which did prove effective in keeping a lot of people out of problems with the hospital, particularly those with comorbidities and even those without comorbidities. So I don't know. Acronym, that was it. Thank you, Adam Cohen. And it is a ding word. I don't know where we all end up on this, but I know that the complete clearing of the table of all of these vaccines that have proven so effective through the years is utter lunacy. And I think RFK Jr. is an utter loon. I mean, I've come to the realization, as maybe many of you have as well, that he is so much a political operative that it's grotesque to watch him, like everybody else, just vomit up a bunch of compliments to Donald Trump and then all the disparaging comments about Biden. It's, again, American politics has taken on an ugliness, and I'll play you another clip here from Miller in a second, and you'll just see the way we've changed as a society, the political discourse. I'm not suggesting everything has to be, bow ties and cocktail parties, but I do think the degree to which we've seen everything degraded from information to political discourse is pretty gross. So that's what you're seeing played out. I mean, that's sort of the coin of the realm in Washington. The grosser, the more you smear, the more heat you throw, the better you are, the more valued you are politically. And RFK Jr. fits right into all of that. But that's what's happening with the latest there. I mean, we have people, I have friends who actually got polio. They were, right, and Bill Mann, who's a viewer of this show, he's been on the show talking about it. He got the vaccine, the polio vaccine, a little too late. So he's been free of polio for most of his life. But now, as an advanced senior, he is beginning to demonstrate and be affected by many of the symptoms of polio. So I think we've gotten, I talk about this all the time, we've just gotten complacent. We're not a serious crew anymore in America in many ways. And so we succumb to the bullshit of Joe Rogan and of the anti-vax jihad. And it's dangerous. And it's now in charge of public policy.
It would be embarrassing to watch him, RFK Jr., sit there and not be able to answer the questions and reveal himself to be completely incompetent if, as you say, it weren't so dangerous to public health.
Indeed. Yeah, Blue Spark is right. The polio vaccine was considered an absolute miracle when it was developed. Yeah. Thanks for that. David Katz, the brilliant legal analyst, I think he's one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world. He joins us in just a few minutes. I want to take a moment. I'm going to play you that Stephen Miller cut in a second to recognize a couple of you who have joined the conversation through Super Chat and Super Stickers. We are live with Super Chat and Super Stickers through the entire show. And I give you Luis. What makes idiot RFK Jr. qualified for his job? I'd sleep better at night if Albert was on the job.
Yeah, so would I.
Albert, thank you.
Albert, at least his lower standards would be a vast improvement. Wow, Albert, I think you've been, that's a backhanded compliment.
He'd walk in, he'd go, you know what? Everything looks to be running fine. I don't really need to do much here. I'm just going to sit back and let it roll.
Albert would be in Hawaii half the time. At least you'd know where he got his tan. Joan Hollywood says, every time you ding, the dogs run out the door to see who's here. I'm sorry about that, but a big shout out to you.
Big shout out.
I hate to say it, but I work in Florida, says West Theory, and write software for a nurse staffing company. I have a feeling business is going to tick up soon. Yeah, we're getting sicker and we're going to need more nurses. Thank you, Wes, for the $5 super chat. Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, sure, if you had to, just take the temperature of the patient right now, it's pretty, sadly, running a fever. Wes says, RFK did get a good one-liner that made me laugh. Why do you care? I fired her. You voted against confirming her. Yeah, about the CDC director who he fired. Yeah. My God, Trump can pick winners. Misogyny gone wild, says Harry Magnum with a $5 super chat. Yep. And Luis says, Florida once again distinguishing itself as the mecca of ignorance, equating effective vaccine mandates for children to slavery. Welcome back, polio. Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, it is scary. The logical extension of what we're seeing is serious. And
on that note, just talking about, the differences in vaccines, I saw this article where a health expert is saying, you know what? You probably in the next coming years don't want to take your kids to theme parks in Florida. Like, this is a place that you would want to avoid because they are changing the vaccine rules in Florida. And so perhaps it's going to be this hotbed of disease that you want to avoid. And I wonder if that will affect business at places like Disney World, Epcot Center, Universal Studios Florida, all of these places where, you bring kids, and God help you if you run into an outbreak when you go there.
Well, there was a measles outbreak, as you know, in Southern California at the Disneyland there. And Kim is right. The renowned infectious disease expert, Michael Osterholm, just yesterday warned of the potential fallout from Florida's move to end all vaccine mandates in the state, especially for school children. He said it may be a hotbed of transmission. Those were his words. And he said, I wouldn't want my kids going to Florida in the years ahead to go to Walt Disney World or any place like that, a congregate setting. He's the one who wrote that book, The Big One, Why Future Pandemics Will Be Worse and How We Must Prepare. This book is out next month, and it summarizes the public health policies of President Trump's second term. So, yeah, so much of what you say and what he warns about is now being talked about openly. I want to get to, before I get to David Katz, I want to get to just a bizarre moment.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Stephen Miller, who is the attack dog, maybe the lead attack dog. It's tough. There's a lot of competition for being the lead attack dog for this administration. He went on Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity is the kind of the coiffed, well put together attack dog for Trump. And as we learned in the first administration, he functioned as a de facto advisor to the president. Remember, he was talking to Trump every day. Anyway, Stephen Miller went on with Sean Hannity. Was this about the rumor that Trump's health is in trouble? Isn't this what he was responding to, Kim? I think that's what it was. That
the questions about Trump's health and the being made fun of on the late night shows and all of that stuff. Yeah.
So here's Stephen Miller responding to it.
What is your reaction to the likes of Kimmel, Colbert, Jen Psaki, Tim Walz, etc.?
Where do you even begin with these morons, Sean?
That's a good question. Would you like me to answer that? You want to be the host? We'll reverse roles here.
President Trump has done more press conferences, more interviews, more transparency, more public accessibility, more hours and hours with the press. He live streams his cabinet meetings for nearly 4 hours. There's no human being in the history of politics who has made themselves more available to the press and the public than President Trump, or who has demonstrated more stamina in public life. I can tell you that every single person who works for him in the White House is outworked by him. He is the first one to call us in the morning, in the early hours of the morning. He is the last one to call us far past midnight on every single work project, whether it's trade, whether it's national security, whether it's the border, whether it's crime, whether it's public safety, whether it is making our cities beautiful again, whether it is making our government responsive, whether it's improving the workforce, whether it is dealing with the need for cheaper housing. You pick the issue. He's on top of it 24/7.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
I mean, essentially, that's just, as I say, the propaganda machine being enabled by the other propaganda machine. Fox News Channel being the other propaganda machine, and then the Trump propaganda machine comes in. But I mean, he's, many say that in this configuration, with Trump sort of aging out of being interested in the job, sure, he shows up for, as Miller was saying, these 3.5-hour cabinet meeting because it's televised. And it's not a cabinet meeting on policy. It's a bunch of people sitting around lavishing praise upon him. I mean, if you can't sit through that, I mean, then you really don't belong anywhere near the White House. And so Trump's view is, and of course, Trump doesn't belong anywhere near the White House, but I can put on a tie and a jacket and let's fire up the cameras and now, call on different people to tell me that I deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, the cabinet meeting was laughable. I mean, it was like an SNL sketch. It really was. I have never seen anything like that, except for the
I've never seen anything like it.
yeah, and except for the fact that in the first administration they did that same around the horn thing where everybody paid homage to the leader.
They are kissing my ass.
Exactly. Anyway, the deal is that Miller's out there as the attack dog, but that was a great moment.
Does anybody really believe that Trump is working from morning till night? I mean, half the time he's on the golf course anyway. And we know from exposés on his last administration that he sits around watching TV for most of the day.
Well, that's work, Kim. That's work in a way. He's getting,
The whole, getting your exercise in by throwing hot dogs at the wall, that's a big deal.
I've got stuff here that I'm going to hold off until Katz arrives. Washington, D.C. is suing the Trump administration for the deployment of the National Guard. The National Guard in Washington and the changing way in which police are dealing with stoppages. For example, when they pull somebody over and they take off, they're dealing with that in a different way. There's a new mandate and a new directive as to how to handle it, and it's led to total chaos. So there have been 10 car chases, 6 crashes. The park police have new directives under this Donald Trump policy and take over Washington, D.C. I'll get to some of that a little bit later. I don't want to get too deep into it. But again, the legal part where Washington is suing, we will talk to David Katz about that as we're standing by for the counselor to come through any minute now. It is the NFL that begins tonight, Albert. Has to be an exciting moment for you as commissioner of sports on this show. And
The Mark Thompson Show.
I don't know. Who is it up tonight? Eagles and Cowboys?
Eagles and Cowboys.
Yeah.
So Eagles are celebrating their Super Bowl championship, and the Cowboys do have a documentary that just came out, and people are following episode by episode. And so there's some hype going into the game. But yeah, today's the first day. First game.
Is the Eagles team, Commissioner, about the same team that they fielded for the Super Bowl, or they've lost? Usually Super Bowl teams lose coaches to other teams. They lose major stars to other teams, etc. What's the situation with the Eagles?
Mostly the same. All the important people are back. So I think they are heavily favored, if not just regularly.
Do you have a number on how heavily favored they are for tonight?
I don't, not off the top of my head,
All right.
but a lot of predictions saying that they...
You don't want to sully the commissioner's office with gambling? Is that the reason you don't know the line?
Oh, we'll talk about that off the air. We'll talk about the lines.
You're a purist, if nothing else, Albert. So I appreciate that. Smash the like button if you would. It helps us in the world of YouTube. Costs you nothing. Appreciate you being here. You can subscribe to the show. Hit the notification bell. You'll know when we drop a video. We drop special videos on the weekends, just a couple, but I certainly want you to be aware of when they drop. How much do we have to contribute for you not to play any more racist Lex Luthor, that is Stephen Miller clips? LOL, says Luis. $5 super chat. Well, we don't play a lot of him, but we play a little of it. So mercilessly mock authoritarianism. That's the new MMA, says Tom Graves with a $2 super chat. Yeah. Thank you all, super chats and super stickers live, and we appreciate you being here. This counselor is next, the great David Katz.
Feel it in your soul. The Mark Thompson Show.
You can help keep us alive. The Mark Thompson Show is a website, themarkthompsonshow.com. There are live links to Patreon and PayPal, and a big thank you to everyone who is part of our Patreon and PayPal community. We're an NPR PBS model, sort of like, we give you the show for free on YouTube. We do it live every day, and it then goes up as an audio podcast to Spotify, to iHeartRadio, to Google Podcasts, on all the major podcast platforms as an audio podcast. And you are given the show for free. And the only reason we can do that is because there are so many of you who do make monthly contributions as Patreon and PayPal supporters. And you can do that under all our videos. There are hot links to Patreon and PayPal, and you can be part of the community that supports this show. It's really a great thing to see that we've been able to take this show from the radio, commercial radio, where we had to run 6 and 7 minutes of commercials every 15 minutes, to this, where once in a while I have to mention this that I'm doing right now, Patreon and PayPal. But apart from that, this comes to you again, because of the generosity of so many who are the Patreon and PayPal backbone of this show. And all those names are run at the end of every show. Everybody who is part of Patreon and PayPal.
It's nice not having to break you to commercial.
Yeah.
We could just get to whatever we want to get to.
Thank you. The conversations, we don't have to break them up. So, anyway, there we go.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, let's get to him. He's, I think he's one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world. You'll hear him on British radio and see him on British television. And then here in this country on News Nation, a Fox News channel, and across the various television networks, and even into New Zealand and Australia, I've seen him. How about it for the great former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, David Katz, everyone.
Hi, great to be with you.
It's really always a pleasure to have you in. And now I turn to what you predicted, which was that the courts would turn back the tariffs. You suggested that the tariffs, which were imposed illegally, I mean, as Congress pulled back and sort of let the president lean in to his tariff policy, that even as it was being implemented, it ultimately would be judged as illegal. Bring us up to speed. Apparently, a major judicial judgment agrees with you.
Well, I was on News Nation yesterday, and I confidently predicted, they don't have a Katsadamas photo of me like you do, Mark, but I confidently predicted, and I know I'm sticking my neck out a little bit, that even this U.S. Supreme Court will find that the tariffs imposed by Trump unilaterally and really arbitrarily are illegal. And the reason that I say that, it's gone up now to two courts. They're both obscure courts unless you practice in that field. One was that Court of International Trade that ruled against Trump several months ago, but he didn't say that Trump had to stop collecting the tariffs. So we're going to have that effect on the economy. It's percolating, but it's going to start really adding to more inflation, even if the Supreme Court does strike it down, because he's had it for several months. This is what we always joke about, Mark, that you have a right to not have the Constitution violated with Trump to the extent you have it, but he violates it for months and months anyway before the U.S. Supreme Court gets to it if they do the right thing. And of course, there are stays so that the ruling below doesn't go into effect right away. But after that court ruled against Trump, and yet he was allowed to keep collecting the tariffs because this stay didn't go into effect, then it went up to a court called the Federal Circuit, the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. There are about 12 or 13 courts around the country, but there's two that are in Washington, D.C. One of them is the D.C. Circuit to handle cases in D.C. And so it doesn't have a first, second, third. But then there's this Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Well, it got this case, and it took it en banc, and it voted 7-4 that these tariffs are illegal. One of the reasons that they're illegal is because the emergency that supposedly exists patently doesn't exist. And to the extent this case had a trial in the lower court, Trump could never prove that any real emergencies existed. The two supposed emergencies that allow him to use this emergency power to collect taxes without Congress weighing in on it are that drugs are coming into the country. Oh my God, there's gambling going on. There's drugs coming into the country. Well, this has, of course, been happening forever. And while fentanyl is very bad, we've had drugs like fentanyl, we've had cocaine, methamphetamine, you name it's been imported into the country. And that's not an emergency that suddenly just was emergent and that demanded action. And the other one is that, here's another one that you're going to be shocked by. We have a trade imbalance. Well, we've had a trade imbalance for years and years. We've also been, negatively, we've been financing the government with borrowed money also for decades. So none of this is an emergency. This was just performative. And then, of course, Trump uses it to twist arms around the world and tell, like Vietnam, we're going to hit you with a really high tariff unless you approve a Trump hotel in Vietnam. It's so shocking. It's unbelievable. If this were happening in any other country, the State Department, which has also been emasculated under Trump, would be screaming, oh my God, this is a banana republic. This is pay to play. We're going to impose sanctions on this country that's doing exactly what Trump is doing. And of course, Trump is being empowered by the U.S. Supreme Court ruling a couple of years ago on presidential immunity. So he can actually take that sort of what I view as a clear bribe quid pro quo from Vietnam, but because it's an official act, you could prove it. He could have said to the Vietnamese premier, he could have said, approve my Trump hotel or you will pay double the tariffs. You hear me loud and clear? You could have that on a recording, and under the U.S. Supreme Court ruling, that kind of quid pro quo would be allowed.
Yeah, but what you just described actually did happen. I mean, not, as you say, maybe not explicitly, as you've just mentioned, but there was the implicit notion that if we grant this guy approval of his resort in Vietnam, he'll drop the tariffs. They granted it. They moved a bunch of people. The area that the resort takes up, people live there. They had to move those people out.
Would say Trump property approved, Vietnam tariffs went down. You could put that on a bumper sticker.
That's right. And it actually did happen. But now to the legal part, though. Please just follow through. So Trump is saying, I'm taking this to the Supreme Court. My concierge Supreme Court will rule with me.
U.S. Supreme Court, right, and immediately asked for a stay of that 7-4 ruling. And he asked that the Court of Appeals granted the stay. Even though they ruled against Trump 7-4, they granted the stay so that Trump can keep collecting the tariffs. Now, he says deceptively, hey, we've collected twice as much for the federal revenues by collecting twice the amount of tariffs that we did. Of course, you could always collect more money in tariffs. It's the effect that it has on the economy and prices in America. So once you add the billions and billions of dollars added to what consumers are going to have to pay all over the country, it's a nothing burger to collect double the amount of tariffs at the customs window. So that's what he says. But there are a couple of interesting things about the U.S. Supreme Court taking cert. And I suppose it would have been remarkable if they'd have just denied cert and said, okay, that's it. The appellate ruling goes into effect. It's just such a big deal. It's a big deal because of the harm it's going to have so many ways around. So I expect them to rule pretty soon whether the customs, whether the government can keep collecting those tariff payments. If the Supreme Court says stop collecting the tariff payments, that will tell you which way they're going to rule. Because that is something that if they're going to rule the way I think they're going to rule, and they conference these cases pretty early, especially if they have 5 or 6 votes, that looks like they're going to rule the way I think they are going to rule, because I think they're going to do the right thing on this economic issue. They've got to stop the tariffs from being collected, because there's going to be a huge recoupment when they finally rule, as I think they will, in favor of these businesses. And that is truly an administrative nightmare. Now, Trump argues, look at what an administrative nightmare it would be, U.S. Supreme Court, if you followed the law and ruled against us. Of course, you can't create an administrative snafu and nightmare and then tell a court, oh my God, look at a mess it's going to be if this court does the right thing. Look at the mess that I've made. I'm going to take so much effort to clean up the mess that I made. Judge, rule the other way. But that's exactly what the Trump administration is saying. The good news is that the Treasury Secretary apparently has a plan B, how this is all going to get undone and how they are going to allow the recoupments. And I guess you can give people credits. That'll kind of work, Mark. I mean, just in terms of business, I have a client who actually deals with the port. This is like a real thing for him and all these other small and medium-sized businesses. And you can go bankrupt waiting for this thing to be.
I was just about to say, small businesses, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was just about to make the point. Small business has been dramatically affected. Many have gone under. I've made this point repeatedly over the last few weeks, because these are withering taxes on small businesses that are already operating oftentimes on small margins. So, they have real damages, David. They could sue the U.S. government for having imposed these illegal taxes and having cost them their business.
I think most of those countries are going to make a deal. Nobody wants a trade war with the United States. A trade war hurts everybody. Trump is performative. He acts like, he's the big dominant monkey. And he's the big dominant monkey because the U.S. market's so huge. And of course, our consumer market is what every manufacturing company wants to sell to. But let's say that you're India right now. India has this ridiculous 50% rate. It has the highest rate in the world. Things fell apart dramatically with Modi, who's not exactly a non-authoritarian leader himself. He's kind of like a little bit the Trump of India, this Modi guy. And it looked like they were having this sort of a love letter affair that he was having with that North Korean dictator the first time around. Now, Modi, in fairness to him, does manage to get himself elected. I don't agree with his policies, but he does manage to get himself elected. apparently, Trump said he should win the Nobel Peace Prize for solving the India-Pakistan question, which, if you know anything about the history of India and Pakistan, is so outlandish on so many levels. It's the kind of ignorance which is almost unfathomable. You know, millions of people died after the partition. They're still fighting each other. They have Kashmir divided, but he wants the Nobel Peace Prize because he solved the. You know, it's like Modi saying to him, you know, we ought to get the I Modi, the head of India. I ought to get the Nobel Peace Prize because I've solved all the problems between the United States and pick 'em, you know, Venezuela, the United States and Cuba, the United States and Russia. And you would just, so this apparently made things deteriorate. And then they went off the hinges, and now tariffs are at 50%. So if this gets thrown out, you know, they're going to modify the tariffs. Of course, the tariffs will come down. And the good news will be that what the Supreme Court, I think, will say in this case, I think they have about 6 votes to say this. I think Roberts and, you know, Amy Coney Barrett, maybe even Gorsuch and Kavanaugh get the fact that this really is, that you cannot find anywhere in the Constitution or in that emergency law that the president has the power to do this without Congress. Now, what the Republicans did, Mark, is they just stepped aside. They figured their voters wouldn't really get this. Yeah, prices would go up, but they wouldn't really blame their senator. So the Republican senators figured they could get away with this and not rein him in. And of course, Trump's position is that he can do this because Congress has acquiesced in it, and Congress hasn't reined him in. So people like me who say, well, Congress has to be involved, his argument is that they were involved. They have the power to rein me in. These are emergency provisions. And I took these emergency provisions and I made myself the dominant monkey of tariffs all over the world. And I squeezed all these countries around the world, and I got my golf courses approved around the world. But the Senate didn't stop me. They could have, and they didn't. And they almost stopped him with Canada. Our relations with Canada have totally deteriorated, and tourism from Canada is way down, Mark. But they were within a vote, I think, of stopping him from making this tariff trouble with Canada that he was making. But they couldn't even get the votes to do that. And they certainly never got the votes to make him do something rational over tariffs and to stay within his lane as the president. So hopefully the Supreme Court, and I think they will on this one, they will say that Congress has to be involved. Congress will get involved, and they'll straighten out the tariffs with all these countries, which, you know, the Constitution does say that Congress, right, Article 1, that the Article 1 Congress, that's the center of our government, has specific authority over taxes and duties. It specifically says taxes and duties are to be set by Congress.
You know, they vacated that responsibility. I mean, you know, Trump's not wrong in thinking, hey, you guys, if you had a problem with it, you should have said something type thing. I mean, no one wants to say anything. And this is interesting because it speaks to what Randy's just saying this in the chat. Trump should just go to Congress on all the tariff stuff. Congress will pass anything Trump wants them to. I don't know about that on tariffs now. Would you agree with me, David Katz?
Yeah.
I don't know if he can squeak that through this crew.
Right. You take North Dakota. North Dakota has 2 Republican senators. They're very reliant on trade with Canada. Those North Dakota senators, Republicans, don't want to stand up and say, yeah, we put a huge duty on Canada, and yeah, their wood is not coming in, and yeah, our construction industry is collapsed in North Dakota because I voted for this. But they think they're 2 or 3 steps removed from their voters really getting it and punishing them at the polls, even though those North Dakota senators are absolutely responsible for not standing up to it. So no, this would not win. You know, these guys all want to, they want to preserve their jobs.
Right.
And they're scared of Trump coming in with his MAGA base and primarying them.
Well,
but they're scared of other things too. They're scared of doing something which is so obvious. I mean, a Democrat could beat them if they voted for some of these things. And they're very trade conscious, a lot of these you know, a lot of these states, but they hide behind it because they haven't voted on it. And when the Supreme Court hopefully rules as it does, they'll just say, Trump, he went off the rails, and now we're settling the whole.
You've kind of addressed this, but question for Mr. Katz from Chaplain Fred. Thanks for the $10 super chat. If Trump is collecting tariffs as we speak, what is going to happen with the money collected thus far? Is Trump keeping it? Well, I don't think
Trump's figured out how to keep the crypto money. He's apparently kept $4 billion just in the months since he's been president.
Yeah, the crypto thing is an absolute payoff.
He's
yeah,
stuck
that's
right in his pocket. And I'm
stealing.
sure he's thinking of some way to stick this money in his pocket. But so far, at least so far as we know, this money will not go into his pocket. So what will happen to it? They'll make requests for recoupment. they'll say, and they keep very good records. I mean, everybody in importing now is keeping a record of how much they're owed had the tariffs not been imposed on them. And then they'll make a case. If they don't, the government doesn't settle with them, they'll go to the Court of Claims and they'll say, hey, you owe me $89,000.03 because I overpaid my tariffs. And then the huge big boys will probably, they'll do the accounting thing where it gets credited back to them.
Right.
Like I said, the big boys, most of them haven't gone broke over this. So that's what will happen. Now, let's just to talk about this very briefly. If the Supreme Court does affirm this, this is just a disaster. Because, they always act like, one thing that kept both parties in line, Mark, was they realized what goes around comes around. But this MAGA crowd that's in power right now, they act like there's never going to be another election. I know people are really scared there's not going to be another fair election where they really count the votes and do everything proper election. But, politicians, including like presidents, have always believed what goes around comes around. And if you want to do stuff like this, I mean, imagine this wielded by a Democratic president. He doesn't have either house. Now, it's true that enough senators could stop him from doing this because they would stand up to him. But if it were close, let's say it was the last time where there were 51 or 52 Democratic senators, but you couldn't count on the coal guy Democrat, and you couldn't count on the flaky lady from Arizona who loved the carried interest financiers who backed her.
Yeah,
and so
Manson Cinema. Yeah.
Yeah, you never kind of knew what was going to happen with those folks. It would seem like, Biden could have done this too. And, Democrats haven't historically had a taste for this, but you could have a guy who had a woman who had a real taste for this. And to do, I mean, we're so used to what Trump does, and he does it every day. And we get, we try to be alert to everything. But, you can imagine a really powerful, forceful Democrat doing this. You can basically run the foreign policy of this country, not the Senate, not the law, not the House. You as president could run. You just tell somebody, okay, you got to pay 70% tariffs. And all of a sudden you have, you've really controlled. You don't need treaties. You don't need the House. You don't need the Senate. This power, if the U.S. Supreme Court votes the other way, everyone's going to have an emergency. Next president is going to have an emergency, can do whatever they want. If having a negative trade balance in the United States and having drugs come into the country, if those are emergencies, everything's an emergency. And the president just does whatever they want to with every country in the world, punishing some, rewarding others, sticking money in their pocket.
Yeah, I mean, it's just opening a door to immense corruption, and also irresponsible, chaotic policy. I mean, this is kind of where we are now. I want to ask you about, you mentioned the voting. I want to ask you about what's happened with the seizing of voting machines. So the Justice Department now has begun an effort to look at voting machines in Missouri. They want this voting equipment. It's odd that they've chosen Missouri because Missouri was a state that Trump won. But in a way, it's not odd that they've chosen seizing voting machines because Trump doesn't want voting equipment. He doesn't want mail-in voting. And this is just sort of a way that he's maligning the integrity of voting systems, right? And so the Justice Department, again, wants this voting equipment used by 2 Republican clerks in Missouri during the 2020 election. And so apparently the request was rejected. But I'm wondering about so much has been said about the voting machines. There's the whole lawsuit with Dominion voting systems and them being disparaged by right-wing media. Ultimately, as it turns out, the integrity of those voting systems was pretty well not only upheld, but the court judgments landed pretty heavily on Fox and on OAN, I think. They had to write huge checks. Tell me to what degree the Justice Department has the right to go in and demand these voting machines, and what could possibly happen there?
Well, even for Rupert Murdoch, $787 million was more than walking around money, right? So they paid huge for defaming Dominion. And just to remember, this was the disgraceful presenters on the Fox, not the ones that I go on with, but you know that crowd that's on. I think that was the Tucker Carlson. I think that was a part of his demise. That Bartolino, I think.
Bartiromo, yeah.
So that was a huge debacle, and some of them still have lawsuits. I think Newsmax, the even further right-wing station than Fox, I think they just settled. Check me on that, but I think they just settled for a very large sum over this same thing. And there's another one called Smartmatic, which I think was also defamed. It also has lawsuits going against some of those folks. So, and the things that they said were just totally outrageous. Somehow Hugo Chavez down in, he and his cronies down there in Venezuela had rigged those machines, and those machines are still rigged. And I don't know how they got them to go from voting for Hugo Chavez to Joe Biden, but supposedly that's what they were doing, and they weren't counting the votes properly. And then every time they checked one of them, they were voting. They were counting the votes properly, and there was no there. And they kept putting that story on Fox night after night. And then, of course, Newsmax was putting it on their station, too, because Fox was the first one, ironically, that had called, I think it was Arizona, for Biden. And so the Fox viewers, the real MAGA ones, were furious. They didn't want to watch Fox anymore because they were telling them something they didn't want to hear. They went over to Newsmax in large numbers, Mark, and then they came back to Fox, generally speaking. And now Newsmax is actually suing Fox as of a couple of days ago, saying that they are engaging in anti-competitive practices, that Fox is doing all those things. So in terms of getting these machines, I guess the reason they're doing it in Missouri is it's a red state. If they tried to do it in California, every official would say, are you crazy? You have no right to, do we have a right to look at all these federal things that we're kind of curious about? No, this is state property. This thing was properly conducted. There's no evidence. And no, you can't just rummage around because you want to rummage around. This guy in Missouri, I think he went to the White House or something. So they got a guy from Missouri who's a MAGA. He went to the White House where he's a MAGA. He probably knows people. He thought somehow he could inveigle them to give the voting machines or access to the voting machines. And you say that even that hasn't worked. And it's they're going to, they're going to make some kind of mischief. Who's going to watch over that? Oh, excuse me, Kash Patel, Bongino. Oh no, the Deputy Attorney General. He's going to come and make sure that it's all totally clean. Nobody believes the Department of Justice anymore is geared toward justice with Epstein. And how about with this thing? You'd have to videotape it. And whatever they found, if they said, oh my goodness, this machine was rigged in a certain way, nobody would believe it. And you worry that they would rig it. And then they would be all ready for the performance, and they'd show it to the world and say, oh my God, it's rigged. It's rigged. And maybe Kash Patel or Bondi would hold a press conference. And who would be impressed by any of it? The people who want to believe, I guess they would believe. But, the people in the middle, they've so lost credibility, Mark. It's, as a former assistant U.S. attorney, it's just so sad how the Department of Justice has lost credibility.
Yeah, I mean, everything's been degraded. And you understand that this investigation into the 2020 election is all part of Trump's jihad, which is associated with pursuing that big lie, which is that the election was stolen. So your tax money and my tax money is going to the continued investigation at the Justice Department to that election lie. They're essentially reverse engineering. They're starting with the notion that this election was stolen in 2020. Trump actually had won it. Now let's find evidence to support that conclusion. And so this is all in service of that. And so, again, when it comes to the actual work of the Justice Department, the kind of work that you did when you were a federal prosecutor, et cetera, it's all being diverted, much of it, in ways like this to support the Mad King's assertion. And so to me, it's an affront. I mean, it's insulting. But the other thing that's going on in Washington, where you used to work, is the District of Columbia is being occupied by National Guard forces, and there are a lot of those troops that are picking up trash, and they're, taking graffiti off of walls. That's all great. I love the beautification of Washington, D.C. I'm sure it could be done at a fraction of the price, and also without the inconvenience of National Guard troops, all of whom have real jobs as real estate agents, as accountants, and they're now called upon by the president to be props in this ridiculousness in Washington, D.C. So the district is suing, and they're asking a federal court to intervene on this troop involvement in civilizing Washington, reducing crime, whatever the end goal as stated is. DC wants those troops out, and they're going to court to try to make it happen.
Well, the president has power in DC more than he does in any other city. So this is not, whatever ends up happening in D.C. doesn't mean that any of it would work in Chicago or in New York City. In terms of what happened in Los Angeles, the judge up in San Francisco did finally rule. There's a trial, a final judgment. People are very confused at what happened there because he said that what Trump had done here, invading, L.A. on a pretext, saying that there was uncontrollable violence when there was not at all. He had issued an injunction, and then that was overturned 2-1 by the appellate court, saying that his injunction couldn't go into effect. But that returned the case to the trial judge up in San Francisco. It's confusing, who was trying the case of what happened here in L.A. After a 3-day trial, he finally ruled that this was a violation of what they call the Posse Comitatus Act, which is a 19th century law, which sensibly says that, we don't want to be a military dictatorship. We don't want troops, army troops, military troops who are supposed to fight the enemy going against Americans and making Americans the enemy. And so therefore they cannot perform law enforcement functions. And so Trump's argument in that case, which was just repudiated by the trial judge up there, and this would be a great precedent. It wouldn't actually control because it's a trial court. So it doesn't control. If he went into Chicago, that wouldn't be a precedent that would bind the courts in Chicago, but it's extremely persuasive. He's a very good, very careful judge. He's actually the younger brother of Supreme Court Justice Breyer, who just resigned. He gave up his seat, and his former clerk actually got that seat. She's one of the 3 on the U.S. Supreme Court. But anyway, this judge up there, highly respected, did a really good job on the case, said what was really obvious to everyone except, I guess, the 2 Trumpy judges on the Ninth Circuit that had stopped the injunction from going into effect down here, that, yes, federal troops can protect federal buildings. If they're about to burn down a building, yes, the federal troops can come in lest they burn down a building. But the idea that you're sending federal people around, it could be IRS agents. Think about that, right-wingers, when the shoe's on the other foot. They could be IRS agents. They could be ICE agents. They could be EPA inspectors. The fact that there are federal workers doesn't mean that you could send Army troops anywhere the federal workers go on the pretext that they're protecting federal workers. That was Trump's pretext, that ICE was going places, that the ICE officers needed more protection. You had these federal people who are at risk, and therefore you could call out the Army to protect the people and go everywhere that the people went. Anyway, that's what the court said you can't do. That's going to stand, Mark. We are not a military dictatorship. There are not 5 votes on the U.S. Supreme Court, in my opinion, who are going to say we're that kind of, and I think Trump knows that. So I think when he talks about going into Chicago, that would be the same law that would apply to L.A. He's going to find a judge there. He's going to find the 7th Circuit there who is not going to approve of that. All that the federal troops can get called out to do is a true insurrection. And another court also just found that even if you think that the Venezuelans coming here en masse was sort of an invasion, as like the 3rd use of the word invasion, that's not what the Constitution or the laws mean by an invasion or insurrection. So unless there's a real invasion, there's a real insurrection, and the local authorities can't put it down, or you're protecting federal buildings. What happened to us in LA was illegal. I think the 9th Circuit, when it comes back to them, is going to say it's illegal, and the Supreme Court's either going to not take it or they're going to say it's illegal.
First on the Nullifidian says ICE is armed, but they need more protection. Yeah, exactly. There's
That's what's astonishing. And they just got these billions and billions of dollars. The idea that they can't protect themselves on these raids. And like I said, what goes around comes around. There are so many tax evaders in all these red states. Okay. I'm sure there are some people who send this to their friends in red states or who sympathize that way. Okay. So here comes Newsom. He wants to do something as president about all these tax cheats. A lot of them are in red states. And my God, if you think ICE agents couldn't really protect themselves, how about these poor IRS agents who are running around doing audit after audit after audit of all these red state tax cheats? They need the Army to be brought out to go around with the IRS to all these red states because that's what this case is going to hold that they can do. And I think the U.S. Supreme Court and the 9th Circuit is going to take a deep breath and say, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not.
But again, to draw the distinction, you're saying that the president does have the power to deploy the National Guard in Washington, and
that's different.
I get it. But D.C. Again, they have an elected attorney general there as well. And he is suing. This guy, Brian Schwab, is suing. He's saying that this is an illegal deployment. Now, you're saying, yeah, that case probably won't fly. But obviously,
It may, no, it may. I'm just saying whatever they decide there is not precedent for Chicago
okay.
and LA. It's going to involve the DC home rule. Congress did give home rule to DC. This is going to depend on what the parameters are of the home rule. I think probably what Trump is doing in Washington is also illegal. I think without Congress changing the law, the Home Rule Act. So I think he needs an act of Congress. Congress is not, what people need to realize is that these are all things that would be subject to the filibuster. So there are not 60 votes in the Senate to do any of these things. Everyone who says that Trump has to go to Congress and the Congress will do whatever Trump wants. No, the Congress will, they did the big ugly bill, and that's probably about all they're really going to do. And that one didn't need 60 votes. Remember, that was this reconciliation thing. He doesn't have 60 votes for almost anything he wants to do in the Senate.
Yeah, and I'll just make the point that 2 points, actually. One is that he wants to extend and will extend the National Guard presence in D.C. Don't know that it'll actually involve troops there through December, but that's what they have said. They want to extend, and they've talked to the Pentagon about this, the extension of this presence in Washington, D.C. And the cops in D.C. have new rules. They are pursuing vehicles when D.C. cops would not normally pursue vehicles, and the Interior Secretary has thanked Trump for allowing them to chase, quote, bad guys. The U.S. Park Police have initiated 10 car chases in the past 3 weeks as part of this surge in federal law enforcement there in D.C., and there have been 6 major accidents, crashes as a result of these pursuits. So Washington has its own degree of chaos. And the last thing I'll just remind everybody is something we talked about before. When you look at the open table reservations and the other polling of restaurants around Washington, D.C., there's been such a substantial decline in restaurant reservations and in patrons into restaurants. It's extraordinary. It's over 50% month to month. So this idea, and it's just propaganda, that D.C. is flourishing somehow with a National Guard presence, it's just utter absurdity. Yeah.
If you're planning a trip to Washington, D.C. in the fall, come out here to California this fall. We'll treat you right. We need the business, right? Our port is way down because of the tariffs. Our restaurants and a lot of industries here are completely screwed up because people are scared to go to work. So we need the business. So and the other thing that's ridiculous, you know, one of the huge problems with crime, of course, random crime, you know, people who are mentally ill, that kind of crime, of course, that's a huge problem. If you just randomly get mugged or something, that's a huge problem. But then another one is organized crime. People who commit organized crimes are very good at keeping away. I think I said this on your show once before, from narcs, from snitches, from cops. The idea that these army guys, right, all dressed in their fatigues, are really going to, number one, deter organized crime is kind of ridiculous. And it would be a disaster. We don't want them. They're not trained to do this. They're going to go into Anacostia and do what? They're going to march down the street in the highest crime area. Chicago, too. They're going to walk through one of these areas that's, you know, basically controlled by some huge street gang, you know, a la, what was that? New Jack City. They're going to go through the New Jack City of Chicago and do what? There they are. And do what? They're going to go undercover. They're going to be immediately spotted. This would be nothing but a disaster that they would try to fight crime. Meanwhile, the people who know how to fight organized crime, like the FBI, are taking off their wiretaps and taking off the things that the FBI knows how to do to really go after organized crime and to not get made. What are they doing? I'm not making this up, Mark, over 1,000 went through the Epstein tapes. No doubt they found so many references to Trump and to Trump's donors that they said, you know what, it's going to be nothing but blackouts and redactions, so to hell with this project. But before they did that, 1,000 FBI agents got taken off fighting organized crime, fighting real crime, to go do that nonsense. And on top of that, they run around with their FBI jackets along with these ICE guys and bring down the reputation of the FBI for years and years to come. That's all a lot of people are going to remember. Oh yeah, the FBI and the ICE, they went into that car wash and they took all of those nice, hardworking people there. I remember that. They were standing there with a lady who was being separated from her daughter, crying her eyes out because she'd been there 15 years. That's what they're going to remember. They remember the FBI jacket, and they remember that crying lady separated from her daughter. And the FBI special agents hate it, but Kash Patel and Bongino send them there, and they either quit, right? They either quit or they follow orders.
It's a smear, and on top of a smear. I want to change completely and pivot to a case that is in Texas. Texas is moving to allow anyone to sue abortion pill prescribers and distributors. The measure aims to stop the flow of pills into Texas from blue states. It could open package delivery services up to fines, along with doctors and drug distribution firms. The bill is backed by anti-abortion activists, passed in the state Senate yesterday. It allows private citizens to sue companies and individuals who manufacture or distribute abortion pills to patients in Texas. Winning plaintiffs would get a minimum of $100,000 in damages. Abbott, who is the governor there, is expected to sign the legislation into law, and included in the bill, they've actually included this bill on the agenda, I should say, for the state's 2 special sessions this summer, which have largely been dedicated to redistricting, as you know, we've talked about it, and also the July floods. Can you speak to this, the latest attempt to curb the increasing popularity and availability of medication abortion?
Well, first of all, you have to start checking where your connecting flight may go through. You don't want to go through Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio for real, because they could have a warrant for someone's arrest from another state. And a lot of these shield laws don't let them extradite you from one state to another. So they don't allow some poor pharmacist who's just prescribing medication and ends up on a list and ends up maybe being sued. And so I don't think that they're going to allow these shield laws. I think are going to protect you from civil lawsuits if they come into, let's say, Massachusetts, or they come into New York or Illinois, and they try to sue you, or they try to get, let's say, they get an indictment against you. But no kidding, you got to be careful to go into one of those states. It's the old thing, jurisdiction. If they have their hands on you, they have jurisdiction. And they check you, in an airport, you get in the flight and stuff like that. And if you're in the computer that there's a lawsuit, you could be served in Texas. You could be arrested in Texas. So, Texas is about to sort of box themselves out of the country with all this crazy.
But wait a minute. Let me just follow up on that. Are you saying that if I'm involved in as a doctor and having provided a prescription for this medication, or if I'm involved as you're not speaking to who would be the people who you're talking about who would have warrants out for their arrest in Texas? What group of people?
I guess they could say that the nurse was in a conspiracy.
I see. Okay.
Prescribed it. They could say that the person who shipped it was in the conspiracy. So they get 7 people from the prescribing, from maybe the clinician, maybe the person at the pharmacy, everybody in the chain. And they did it. There was somebody who was having an ugly divorce down there, and I guess he got a hold of her prescription and her trail on her internet, and he found the 6 or 7 people who were responsible for her getting her, medical abortion pills. And so that becomes either a lawsuit or it becomes a prosecution. This Paxton down there. So he goes into, this is a real thing. Like I said, as long as you're in Massachusetts, you're in Illinois, I think the fact that they want to sue you, they would treat it as rubbish if they tried to, have the one state cooperate with the other state. Illinois or New York would say, are you kidding? We're not even going to, you tried to serve process there. They wouldn't, the sheriff wouldn't come to your house. Nobody would serve process. But meanwhile, the indictment's sitting out there in Texas. So as I say, you want to be very, very careful. You don't go through, people take Southwest, they go through San Antonio. They don't think a thing about it at all. They run your name in the computer. There's a warrant for your arrest. Okay. Stay out of Texas.
Well, what about the women who want this pill in Texas? Aren't they the real victims here as well?
I don't think that they're crazy enough in Texas yet to prosecute the women, but if you need the medical abortion, obviously, I think they do everything they can. It comes in a brown wrapper. You still need to get a warrant. This lady had the bad luck that her husband, I guess, had access to the property. They were in a divorce. He turned it over. It was probably a consent search because he had a right to consent to the property that they were jointly living in. They still need a search warrant. So there are still some protections procedurally, how they're going to find out that you, Mary Smith, was ordering this medical abortion pill from a pharmacy in Massachusetts. But, this was what the U.S. Supreme Court, this is what they're going to be 100 years from now, Mark. That's what that U.S. Supreme Court's going to be known for. They're going to be known for Dobbs. They're going to be known for the monstrosity that they perpetrated among the American people, and especially women. And every one of their names, Chief Justice Roberts, he thinks he'll be known for other things. He'll probably be known for that and the presidential immunity. And they may be his two Dred Scott cases.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, but you're absolutely right. The judge ruling that Google can keep Chrome. It has to share some of its search engine data with rivals. That was pretty huge. Google was looking at really being broken up. So this is a pretty big deal on the part of the U.S. government the U.S. government was trying to break up Google, essentially.
Google basically won. The stock market reflected that. Google went up. The other remedies would have been worse. This remedy that had to share the code and stuff like that, boy, is that going to be hard to enforce. There'll be loads and loads of lawsuits. They'll say, they'll always say that they shared the code, and the competitors will always say, no, they didn't. They sabotaged it in all kinds of ways. It wasn't really useful to us. And the judge, who seems like a very good judge, was persuaded that all the other remedies were worse. That they sort of needed the funding. It sounds very, very technical, but basically the way that you always go to Google is not an accident. The way you always go to Google first is something that Google pays billions of dollars to Apple and others, that you go to Google first. And so they actually went to court and they told the judge there, without those billions of dollars, we'd really be in trouble. If we didn't get those billions of dollars to send everybody who buys an Apple product to Google, we, Apple, we, the others, would really be in trouble. We really need that revenue. And they showed the judge, I guess, that they really need that revenue. I mean, I don't know the case inside and out, but I would have broken them up.
Clearly, Google is, an immense company. A lot of these companies are Meta. I put in the same category with control over Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook. These are methods of communication and information, and you have really a lock on it. It's again, in a free
How about a little private pleading, Mark? Send them all to the Mark Thompson show, especially on Thursday.
Thank you very much. I want to, last thing I just want to review, because you always talk about the fact that essentially the Trump administration, it might take a while, but they are losing in court. I thought the Harvard judgment was an example of that. The Trump administration found to have illegally frozen billions in Harvard funding. This is research funding, and a federal judge in Boston handing Harvard University a legal victory. This just happened yesterday. It's the latest in this high-profile legal fight over whether the administration, the Trump regime, acted illegally when it froze more than $2.2 billion in Harvard research funding in response to allegations of campus anti-Semitism. So this is a serious win for Harvard and setback for Trump and friends.
Well, yes, the judge had one phrase where she said that Harvard was plagued by anti-Semitism. So that's all that the right wingers are featuring about that case. That even a Democratic appointed judge said that they've been plagued by anti-Semitism, and however bad the anti-Semitic actions might have been, that was a very poor choice of words. I think plagued by anti-Semitism.
Well, she also said it's difficult to conclude anything other than, this is a quote, that the Trump administration used anti-Semitism as a smokescreen for a targeted, ideologically motivated assault on this country's premier universities, and did so in a way that runs afoul of federal law. So she made that point as well.
That's the headline. That's the headline. I'm just saying she lost the headline. She lost a little bit of the impact of the case, which was tremendously anti-Trump and anti-Trump's actions, because she said that there was no correlation between, they're taking money away from these labs. And she said something interesting. She said, for all we know, there's a lot of Jewish people working in those labs. This is not even helping the problem that you say you're addressing. You say you're going to do something about anti-Semitism, and you defund a bunch of labs that, for all we know, have a very high amount of Jewish people, working in them. So how are you even supposedly helping Jewish people? And of course, this whole, canard of anti-Semitism. I'm Jewish myself. I don't buy that it was anywhere near the level that the propagandists have said that there was. There were demonstrations, and a lot of them were pro-Palestinian. You can certainly understand that with what's going on in Gaza, what's going on with these runaway settlements all over territory, which is not Israel's. You can certainly understand why there was all this anti-Israel protest. That doesn't mean it's Semitic. And to equate those two is a complete false equivalency. And that's been a large part of what's, I think, inspired Trump. But she said that the $2 billion had no correlation. And I think that Harvard is going to play this all the way to victory, and God bless them, because I think that they have really shown, now they have a huge endowment, over $50-60 billion. So they could afford to fight. And I think they could afford to keep those labs open. You know, Columbia was worried that they'd done 20 years of research to combat cancer, and it was all going to go down the drain because they couldn't keep the research studies going. That's a real reason to, quote, capitulate. That's a real reason to settle. I don't blame Columbia for that. Harvard had the money and the grit to fight. And, Harvard's done two things really right. All of those D students in the Trump administration weren't admitted to Harvard. That was right. And number two, they fought those ding-dongs when they went after them. And partly it was because they were Harvard. That's why they were, red meat for the ding-dongs. And I just can't believe that the anti-Semitism reached anything near the level that Trump and the others like to posture that it did.
We're out of time. David Katz, you're so cool to spend this kind of time with us. We'll look for you on News Nation. I think you're on the weekends a lot as a political analyst, and as sort of a legal analyst, you're across the board on. I think you're being, wherever they can track you down, they use you, as I say, across the English-speaking world. But we love you on the Thursdays here, and David Katz and I had a great personal face-to-face, which was we need to do. I think we should do a monthly on that. I'd love to visit with you.
Never been anything like this.
Yes.
Next month, I don't want to show off, but I enjoyed it immensely, and it's still going on, the U.S. Open tennis from New York, and I was there.
Now, were you there?
Yeah, I was there with my wife. We were there.
Wow.
I know, we were there Saturday night, and we were there the Labor Day night, and there's a great match, the men's, a great match tonight, and I bought Mark a hat, which says,
I love that.
I want to see him soon and give him the hat. You can also order them. They're overpriced, but they do say U.S. Open, and they have the year. They're kind of a cool thing in any kind of color. I have unlike Trump, I have no personal interest in what I'm talking about. If this were Trump, he'd be getting a 40% cut of the hat.
I'll trade you with the Mark Thompson show hat for the U.S. Open, but that's right. It came out of nowhere, and I thought, oh my God, are you at the U.S. Open? I was watching tennis. I love tennis, of course, and to me, it would be a dream to go really enjoy the U.S. Open like that. Oh, you already have a pillow. I forgot.
And you have a very comfortable pillow. So
yeah.
I love the Mark Thompson merch, but you got a U.S. Open 2025, and
I'm excited.
Tonight's men's is supposed to be just terrific.
We'll do the trade over. Yeah, tonight's match will be unreal. We'll do the trade over lunch. Look forward to it. David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you.
All right, see you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, gosh, I mean, it's what can I tell you? The time has clicked by. We've got some great stuff on tomorrow's show. Got a great That's Rich, which involves the NBA. Also, private planes, and a major break-in at a Stars house. All of that in That's Rich.
I think I found a story about $11 million worth of stolen goods from a museum in France. And I know you love a good caper.
What?
I love that. A heist. I love heists. Wow.
It was great. I loved it.
All right. Well,
they're calling them national treasures, so that should be interesting.
That's terrific. That's tomorrow. Wow. I'm looking forward to that.
That's pure speculation.
Looking forward to it in a big way. I have a couple of little pieces of business to do. Remember that Ivanka has copyright protection on Trump voting machines in China. She has copyright. Thank you, Tom, for that. Ivanka has. I don't know about the voting machine thing. It might be. We can find out about that. Maybe look into it. I know she has 20 different
Google it.
Yeah. Copyright protections that she was negotiating all of that stuff while there was an economic conference going on in China. It was during Trump season 1, you may remember. I don't know if voting machines are part of it. If
and
you
here
say
I
so.
thought it was just shoes and designer shirts.
Yeah, I don't know, but maybe you can check on it to see if Ivanka has look into Trump's Ivanka Chinese trademarks after the show, of course. They were fast-tracked around 2019. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was talking. I remember that, but I don't remember voting machines being involved. But thank you, Tom. We will look into it.
Google it.
I'll put my best people on it. Sadly, my best people aren't on the show right now. Kim and Albert
That's
are not my
rude.
best people.
Chit,
Yes,
chit.
I am.
What?
I'm sorry, but I'm just, just speaking the, Also,
And I also want to know what happened to the pictures I was supposed to see this
exactly.
week.
While you're checking that out, tell me about where those pictures are. Kimmy Smith with a $5 super chat from NOLA, and Trump threatened to come here instead of Chicago. That's exactly right. Trump has sort of reasserted where the troops are going to go, and he's now thinking, New Orleans needs me and my stormtroopers more than Chicago does. I called MAGA Mike and Governor Landry to tell them to leave us alone. That's from Kimmy Smith. Maybe, Kimmy, your call did it. Because they're not talking Chicago anymore. I think they are talking about showing up elsewhere, aren't they, Kim?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, didn't mean to wake you. So the deal is, we are.
Ivanka's voting machine situation.
What is the story in Ivanka's voting machine? Do you have
There's
any?
several stories, but none I will quote at this time.
Okay.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
I am telling you, this is a.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
All right, let's settle down. We've got a big show tomorrow. I know it's going to.
I'd like to ask for a recess.
The show tomorrow is featuring a Friday Fabulous Florida segment from Albert. It's also featuring the Culture Blaster Michael Snyder on streaming and on movies. And of course, the Weekend Politics will review everything going on Capitol Hill and beyond. These latest court rulings as well, how they factor in politically for Donald Trump. That's Jim Avila and Michael Schur tomorrow. So looking forward to all of that. And now, the great Shadow Stevens to take us out.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Big shout out to all of you who support us.
Bye-bye.
Out of time. Can't do anything more. After Party Live over on that channel. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.